Hello, my name is Taya Graham, and welcome to the Real News Network. The death of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg raises a long-simmering question for progressives. Is the Supreme Court obsolete? The 9-member body that has a final say on the laws that govern our lives has become a backstop for reactionary legal thinking and conservative power plays. And now that the Republican Party has vowed to confirm a new conservative justice just weeks before the election, many are asking how progressives can plan to reform an institution that appears at best out of date, if not entirely undemocratic. Although the Republican Party has a slim majority in the Senate, 53 to 47, they have Vice President Pence as the tiebreaker, which means at least 4 Republicans would have to side with the Democrats. Republican partisans such as Senate Leader Mitch McConnell are using her death as an opportunity to stack the Supreme Court with conservative justices that could undermine generations of civil rights progress. Republican leadership is in a veritable feeding frenzy following her death, already strategizing to replace Justice Ginsburg without conceding a moment to mourn her or to acknowledge her legacy. To discuss what can be done and how progressives can think constructively about reshaping the court in the future, I'm joined by a prosecutor who has spent the past 7 years overhauling a dysfunctional criminal justice system here in Baltimore. Her name is Marilyn Mosby, and she is Baltimore's top prosecutor. She's been out front with reforms of our punitive criminal justice system. For example, under her administration, more police officers have been prosecuted than roughly all of her predecessors combined. She's also refused to prosecute marijuana possession cases despite pleas from the police unions to continue. And finally, she has called for the early release of nonviolent offenders from jail in the wake of COVID-19, prioritizing the lives of inmates over the prison industrial complex. And today she joins me to discuss the fallout over Justice Ginsburg's death and what can be done to reshape the court so the country can embrace forward-thinking policy in the future. State's Attorney Mosby, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Taya. I appreciate it.
So first, let's talk about the legacy of the Honorable Justice Ginsburg. Talk to me about some of the accomplishments that you've seen and that have maybe inspired you.
So first and foremost, I'm saddened and disheartened. You know, this was a bold and brilliant and beautiful attorney, a champion for justice, a feminist, a fighter for gender equality. And she was single-handedly the legal architect for the elimination of gender discrimination in this country, right? So her life experiences growing up in the 50s and the 60s, and being told, trying to break into the legal career and being told that she shouldn't attend. There was no sense in her attending Harvard Law School. You know, even in the academic world, being one of very few, she has always been a trailblazer and one that was going to use her experience for the betterment of this country. And so even after she graduated, you know, even Harvard Law School, she was told that she could make less and she could afford to make less because her husband made so much. And so when you look at that type of legacy that someone like that leaves, right, you have no choice but to understand and recognize that you stand on those shoulders as an attorney, as a woman in this country. And so, you know, despite all of the naysayers and the haters, this woman, you know, kicked down doors, broke glass ceilings, argued Supreme Court cases, and was only second woman ever to be appointed to this position. And so, you know, she has quite a legacy. Her legacy is immense. She's authored opinions and dissents on women's pay and military admissions and abortion. And so, you know, I stand on her shoulders, and I'm incredibly saddened by her loss. It has a great deal. We have a lot at stake at this point. And so even before you get into, you know, how this is going to impact us, I think that we need to understand and recognize that justice is literally on the ballot come November 6th. You know, when it comes to what that means for our children and the next generation of children, it's major.
So, State's Attorney Mosby, I'm so glad that you mentioned talking about what's at stake, because the Democratic leadership has warned Republicans to follow the precedent they set in 2016 when they refused to consider President Obama's choice for the court on the grounds that it was an election year. And Mitch McConnell seems to be going back against that precedent he set. Do you think that Democrats in the Senate will be able to successfully hold the line until after the election?
So I think that we have to be candid, and I think that we have to be real. I think that the Democrats are going to do all that they can, and they should employ every maneuver possible to slow down this process. But we also have to be realistic in that, unfortunately, we always play by the rules. And when the other party is on the other side, they do what they need to do to ensure that they're in places in position of power. And so when you think about the Democrats, and just since McConnell eliminated for the Supreme Court nominees the filibuster, right? Like, what tool do we have to kind of stop and slow down this process other than to appealing to our constituents and to those moderate Republicans that have gone on the record and said that we shouldn't be doing this, but have now changed the course in their tune. So I think that when it's going to be really important for us to emphasize what's at stake, right? These are voting rights and healthcare and immigration and abortion rights. I mean, there's so much at stake. I think that we need to really emphasize the importance of November 6th and getting out and voting, and also putting on the pressure to, whatever we can, highlight these issues for folks so they understand the importance and the magnitude of this time and the most critical election of our lifetime.
You know, it's interesting that you brought up the election and the types of rights that could be impacted. What do you think will be the impact if Trump gets to appoint a third Supreme Court justice?
I mean, it can have a detrimental sort of impact on this country for a very long time. It's going to definitely change the balance of power on the Supreme Court. It will be 6-3, majority Republican. It's already, in my opinion, too partisan. And I think that what he's already basically gone on the record and said is that what we know from the Supreme Court in 2000 is that they were the ones that determined the election. And Trump has already gone out this week and basically said this is what he hopes will happen, right? So we have got to slow this process down and bring attention to the hypocrisy of these Republicans who are now claiming that it's okay, for Trump to appoint this Supreme Court nominee in a matter of 45 days. But when, President Obama attempted to do that 4 years ago, 6 months out, they said that this is far too fast. And so it's going to be important for us to highlight that and to also keep in mind just putting as much publicity as we can and emphasizing that fundamental right to come out here and vote. Get this man out of office.
You brought up something interesting. Do you have any concern that this conservative-leaning Supreme Court will be in a position to decide the presidential election again? You mentioned that President Trump was already signaling in that direction.
I mean, I'm only reading between the lines, and I think that President Trump has been very clear. He's very black and white. He says what he means, and he means what he says. And this weekend, he came out and he said, quote unquote, we're counting on the federal court system to make it so that we can actually have an evening where we know who wins, not where the votes are going to be counted a week later or 2 weeks later. In other words, he plans on using the courts to influence the election in his direction. So it is very problematic and troublesome and something that we should be paying attention to. And another reason why we should be slowing this process down.
So far this year, the Supreme Court has issued rulings on presidential power, congressional oversight, subpoenas to the president, church and state, LGBTQ rights, abortion, dreamers, and even the Electoral College. Do you think the Supreme Court has too outsized of an impact on our country, or do you think that level of judicial power is reasonable?
The judicial power in this country, it can be reasonable. I think that in this circumstance, you are supposed to be unbiased and not swayed by political influence, and that hasn't been the case. And I think when you look at our country, it's the democracy. Our democracy is at stake right now, right? Everything that we've historically thought upon, the ideals of what this country is about, is being challenged by this administration. And so Is it reasonable that we would have a 6-3 conservative majority on the United States Supreme Court that's going to have an impact on our daily lives for generations? I would say it's unreasonable because they're looking to fill that position and without allowing the people to have a say in a matter of 45 days. I think that that's unreasonable. I also think that, you know, when we look at the dysfunction in Congress, right now, the legislature used to be able to work with one another and to solve bigger, larger sort of partisanship issues. And what we're seeing is that because of the partisan politics and because of our democracy that is being challenged by the highest level, that is no longer the case. And so everything is at stake. Our Constitution is at stake. You know, our democracy as a whole is at stake. And so that is why this election is so incredibly important.
And so, State's Attorney Mosby, my final question for you is this. What are your goals? I mean, you come from a family with generations of law enforcement officers, but I know that in the past 7 years, you have charged more police officers with misconduct and brutality than roughly all of your predecessors. What are your next steps this year to protect people's civil liberties?
So I can tell you that I just actually testified on Tuesday on police accountability reform in the House. And then I'm hoping to do so on Wednesday. I'm trying to get on the agenda. I think some folks are trying to stop me from getting on. But right now with, you know, the need for change in this country when it comes to criminal justice reform, when it comes to police accountability standards, this is something that we've been advocating out of my office for the past 5 years. We're going to continue to do so. We have some really, really important bills that are being discussed and decided, you know, as of last week and as of this week. You know, one of the things that's being proposed in Annapolis right now by Senator Will Smith is to take away the power and discretion of the local prosecutor and to give that to the state prosecutor, which is a politically appointed position in cases of police misconduct you know, police involved shootings, right? That would be disastrous because if you want to take partisan politics out of the equation, you don't assign that responsibility to an appointed position. So there are some major sort of issues. What's on the agenda also this week, which is a major reform that we should be paying attention to, is the repeal of the Law Enforcement Bill of Rights. And a lot of those measures tie the police department's hands from getting rid of bad apples and bad police officers. You know, this has been a major issue that we've seen in the city of Baltimore. Again, this is a bill that's being discussed and it's going to be decided now as opposed to the legislative session. And so, you know, it's important for us to pay attention. I will be on that agenda. I was on it last week. I will be on it this week, but we have so much more work to do and I intend to do it.
State's Attorney Mosby, I just want to thank you so much for your time today and for sharing your thoughts and your feelings about Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me, Taya.
Appreciate it. My name is Taya Graham, and this is the Real News Network. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks a lot for watching. Appreciate it. But do us one more solemn favor. Hit the subscribe button below. You know you want to. Stay up on the videos.